In the glittering heart of Manhattan, Victor Harrington slapped Raymond across the face so hard the sound cracked through Harrington's fine dining like a whip. Crystal glasses trembled on nearby tables, and every patron in the upscale restaurant froze mid-bite, forks suspended in midair. Victor's chest heaved, his designer suit suddenly too tight, while Raymond stood stunned, one hand rising slowly to his reddening cheek, eyes wide with disbelief and something far deeper, betrayal. The moment stretched, heavy and electric, before chaos erupted. Phones flashed. Whispers rippled like wildfire. Victor had not meant for it to happen here, not in his family's flagship restaurant where his father's portrait stared down from the marble wall like a judge. But seeing Raymond lean in so close to that other man at table 12, their heads almost touching, their laughter too intimate, had snapped something primal inside him. 2 years of stolen nights, whispered promises, and careful secrecy had vanished in one jealous heartbeat. Now the secret was cracking wide open in front of New York's elite, and Victor felt the empire his grandfather built begin to tremble beneath his feet. Raymond's voice came low, trembling but steady. "You still don't get it, do you? After everything, you hit me to protect your lie." The words landed harder than the slap. Victor wanted to grab him, to drag him out of sight, to explain that he was protecting them both. But the damage was already done. A woman at the next table was filming, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of scandal. Victor's mind raced. His father was due back from Tokyo any minute, the board meeting tomorrow, the merger that would make Harrington global untouchable. One viral clip and it would all burn. He turned on his heel, storming toward the private office at the back, but Raymond followed, footsteps sharp on the polished floor. "Victor, stop running." The door slammed behind them. Inside the wood-paneled room lined with awards and family photos, Victor spun around, fists clenched. "You think I wanted this? You think I enjoy hiding you like some dirty secret? That guy at your table was my brother," Raymond cut in, voice flat. "He flew in from Chicago to tell me our mom's sick. I was asking for time off, not cheating on you. But you never even gave me the chance to explain because admitting you care in public might ruin your precious image." Victor's stomach dropped. The rage drained away, replaced by cold dread. He had assumed the worst because that was how he survived, always assuming the world was waiting to expose him. Raymond's brother. Not a lover. Not a threat. Just family. The same family Raymond had risked everything to keep secret for Victor's sake. Guilt crashed over him like a wave. Outside, the restaurant buzzed louder. Victor could hear the maitre d' trying to calm guests, but the damage was spreading faster than any apology could contain. His phone vibrated relentlessly, board members, PR team, his mother's frantic texts. He sank into the leather chair behind the massive oak desk that had belonged to his grandfather. "I'm sorry," he whispered, but the words felt hollow. Raymond stood by the door, arms crossed, the red mark on his face already bruising. "You always are," Raymond said quietly. "But sorry doesn't change the fact that you chose the empire over us again." He reached into his pocket, pulled out the small silver keychain Victor had given him on their first anniversary, a tiny replica of the Brooklyn Bridge where they had shared their first real kiss under the stars. Raymond placed it on the desk. "I can't keep doing this, Victor. I love you, but I won't be your secret forever." The door clicked shut behind him. Victor stared at the keychain, the weight of 2 years of stolen weekends in upstate cabins, late-night drives along the Hudson, and whispered, "I love yous," in the dark pressing down on his chest. He had fallen for Raymond the day the quiet, hard-working waiter had corrected his father's wine order with quiet confidence during a private family dinner. Victor had been 25 then, freshly graduated from Wharton, groomed to take the reins of a billion-dollar hospitality empire. Raymond had been 23, paying off student loans from NYU while dreaming of opening his own small cafe one day. Their connection had been instant and terrifying. Late shifts turned into stolen conversations in the walk-in fridge. One rainy night after closing, Victor had kissed him against the stainless steel counter, heart pounding with both desire and fear. From that moment, everything became hidden, texts deleted, meetings disguised as business, weekends claimed as solo retreats. Victor told himself it was temporary, that once he secured the CEO position, he could come out on his own terms. But the terms kept shifting. His father, Edward Harrington, preached family values and traditional marriage in every interview. His mother hosted charity galas where she introduced Victor to daughters of senators and CEOs. The board expected a certain image. And Victor, terrified of losing the only world he had ever known, kept Raymond in the shadows. Now the shadows were gone. By morning the video would be everywhere. Victor picked up the keychain, fingers tracing the tiny bridge. He had to fix this. But how do you fix a lifetime of hiding when the person you love most is walking away? The next 48 hours blurred into damage control. PR teams spun the slap as a heated disagreement over service standards. Victor issued a carefully worded statement apologizing for his unprofessional conduct. His father flew in from Asia, face thunderous, demanding explanations in the penthouse boardroom overlooking Central Park. What the hell were you thinking, son? We're days from closing the biggest merger in our history, and you're making us look like thugs on social media. Victor sat across the polished table, tie loosened, eyes burning from lack of sleep. He wanted to tell him everything. The words rose in his throat. Dad, I'm gay. The man I slapped is the only person who's ever made me feel real. But Edward's cold blue eyes, so like his own, stopped him. Instead, he muttered, "It won't happen again." His father nodded once, satisfied for now, and moved on to quarterly projections as if the empire hadn't just cracked. Raymond didn't come back to work. His locker was empty, resignation letter left on the manager's desk with no forwarding address. Victor drove to Raymond's tiny apartment in Queens at midnight, but the lights were off and the landlord said he had packed up that afternoon. Gone. Just like that. The silence in Victor's luxury condo felt heavier than ever. He poured himself a scotch and stared at the city lights, remembering the night Raymond had cooked pasta in this very kitchen, laughing as they danced barefoot to old jazz records. That memory hurt more than the slap ever could. By the third day, the story had evolved. Tabloids dug deeper. Someone leaked Raymond's name. Comments flooded in, speculation, memes, outrage. Is the Harrington heir hiding something bigger? One headline read. Victor's mother called, voice tight with worry. Darling, people are asking questions. Just tell me it's not what they're saying. He lied again. The pattern was so familiar it made him sick. Then the first real crack appeared. An anonymous email arrived in his private inbox, a single photo from 10 years earlier. His father, much younger, standing arm in arm with another man on a beach in the Hamptons, both smiling in a way Edward Harrington had never smiled at his own wife. The caption read, "Some secrets run in the family. Ask your father about Uncle James." Victor's hands shook. Uncle James, the uncle no one ever spoke of, the one who had moved to Europe when Victor was 7 and never returned. The family secret wasn't just his. It was generational. He stared at the photo until his vision blurred. The empire wasn't built on strength alone. It was built on lies. And now those lies were circling back to claim him. Victor drove north along the Hudson at dawn, the anonymous photo burning a hole in his coat pocket. He had not slept. Every mile marker reminded him of weekends he had spent here with Raymond, pulling over at scenic overlooks, sharing coffee from paper cups, talking about futures they both knew might never happen. Now he was chasing ghosts instead. The address attached to the email led to a modest cottage outside Rhinebeck, the kind of place his father would never be caught dead in. The man who opened the door looked like an older, softer version of Edward. Same sharp jaw, same piercing eyes, but with laugh lines and a gentle smile. "Victor," James Harrington said simply, as if he had been expecting him. "You look just like your mother." Inside, over strong black coffee, the story spilled out. James had been in love with a man named Thomas back in the late 80s. Edward had discovered them, threatened to cut James off from the family fortune unless he left. James chose love. Edward chose the empire. The official story became that James had moved abroad for business. No one ever spoke his name again. "But your father never forgot," James said quietly. "I think that's why he pushes you so hard. He's terrified you'll make the same choice I did." Victor's world tilted. The man who had drilled "Harrington men don't break" into his head since childhood had once been broken himself. The photo was real. The secret was real. And now Victor understood the real stakes. If he came out, the board would panic, investors would flee, the merger would collapse. But if he stayed silent, he would lose Raymond forever. He left the cottage with a new weight in his chest. On the drive back, he called Raymond's phone for the 20th time. Straight to voicemail. The message he left was raw. I know about Uncle James. I know why Dad is the way he is. Please, Ray, just meet me. I'm done hiding. No reply came. Instead, another bomb dropped. A major business blog published an investigative piece linking the slap to rumors of a romantic relationship between Victor Harrington and former employee Raymond Alvarez. The stock dipped 3% before lunch. His father summoned him to the family estate in Connecticut, face pale with fury. Fix this, Edward hissed across the mahogany desk. Or I will. That night Victor stood on the estate's terrace overlooking the moonlit gardens, the same gardens where he had once hidden as a child dreaming of being someone else. His mother found him there. You've always been different, she said softly, surprising him. I saw the way you looked at Raymond the few times he served at our private dinners. I never said anything because I hoped you'd find your own way. But darling, the world we live in doesn't make it easy. For the first time in years, Victor cried in his mother's arms. She held him like he was still that scared little boy, and for a moment the empire felt less important than the truth. The next morning, he drove to the small cafe in Brooklyn where Raymond had always dreamed of working. He found him behind the counter, apron dusted with flour, looking tired but determined. Their eyes met across the room, and time stopped. Customers faded. The clatter of dishes disappeared. Victor walked straight to him, voice breaking. I told my mother. I told her everything. I'm going public, Ray. No more secrets. Raymond's hands stilled on the espresso machine. You think that fixes the slap? The years of being your shadow? But his eyes betrayed him, hope flickering beneath the hurt. They talked for hours after closing, sitting on milk crates in the alley behind the cafe. Victor poured out the conversation with Uncle James, the photo, the generational fear. Raymond listened, really listened, and when Victor finished, he reached across and took his hand. I never wanted to destroy your family, Vic. I just wanted to be part of it. They drove back to Victor's condo together that night, the city lights blurring past like possibilities. For the first time, they slept without fear of discovery. But the storm was only beginning. By morning, the board was in emergency session. Leaked texts between Victor and Raymond had surfaced online, nothing explicit, but intimate enough to confirm everything. Stock plummeted another 7%. Edward Harrington called a press conference, face carved from stone. My son's personal life is his own, he said stiffly, but the tremor in his voice gave him away. Behind closed doors, he confronted Victor in the same boardroom where he had once celebrated his son's graduation. You're throwing away everything we built because of one man? No, Dad, Victor answered, standing taller than he ever had. I'm finally building something real. The words hung between them, heavy with history. Edward turned away, shoulders sagging for the first time Victor could remember. The empire was cracking, but something new was rising in its place. Raymond moved in that week. They cooked dinner together, laughed at bad movies, and slowly learned what it felt like to love in daylight. Yet every ring of Victor's phone brought new threats, board members demanding his resignation, investors pulling out, tabloids camped outside the building. One night, Raymond found Victor on the balcony staring at the skyline, shoulders tight. You can still walk away from this, Raymond said quietly. I would understand. Victor turned, pulling him close. I'm not walking away from you. Not ever again. In that moment, under the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss years ago, he knew the choice had already been made. The board vote was scheduled for Friday. Victor spent the week preparing the speech that would either save or doom the company. He rehearsed in front of the mirror while Raymond sat on the bed, offering quiet encouragement. Tell them the truth, Raymond said. Not just about us, about how hiding who you are almost destroyed you. Victor nodded, but fear still gnawed at him. The Harrington name had stood for tradition for 3 generations. He was about to rewrite the entire legacy. His best friend since prep school, Marcus, showed up unannounced Wednesday night carrying takeout and a 6-pack. They had grown up together, shared everything, except this. Victor told him now, voice steady. Marcus stared for a long moment, then pulled him into a rough hug. Took you long enough, man. I always wondered why you never dated any of the girls our moms threw at us. The relief was immense. Not everyone would walk away. Some friendships were strong enough to survive truth. But not all. His cousin Lila, who sat on the board and had always treated him like a younger brother, sent a single text after the news broke. "You're killing the family. Don't expect me at Christmas." The words stung deeper than he expected. Family was fracturing along fault lines he had never seen coming. Thursday night brought the lowest point. A major investor, an old golf buddy of his father's, called Victor directly. "Son, this game nonsense is bad for business. Fix it, or we pull out." Victor hung up, hands shaking. Raymond found him in the kitchen staring at the phone. Without a word, he wrapped his arms around him from behind, chin resting on Victor's shoulder. "You're not nonsense. You're the bravest man I know." They stayed like that until the tension eased. Later, curled together on the couch, Raymond traced patterns on Victor's arm. "Remember the night we drove to Montauk and watched the sunrise? You told me then that one day we wouldn't have to hide." Victor smiled into the darkness. "I'm keeping that promise." Friday morning the boardroom was packed. 20 faces turned toward him as he entered, some curious, some hostile, a few openly sympathetic. His father sat at the head of the table, expression unreadable. Victor stood without notes. "I'm gay," he said clearly. The room exhaled collectively. "And the man I love is the reason I'm finally strong enough to say it. Hiding nearly cost me everything that matters. I won't ask any of you to accept my relationship, but I will ask you to judge me by the work I do. The merger can still happen if we lead with honesty instead of fear." Silence stretched. Then, surprisingly, the CFO, a woman who had watched Victor grow up, started clapping. Slowly others joined. His father remained still, but something in his eyes shifted. Not approval exactly, but recognition. The vote passed by a narrow margin. Victor kept his position. The empire would survive, changed, but standing. That afternoon he found his father alone in the executive lounge. Edward looked older under the fluorescent lights. "I almost lost James forever," he said quietly. "I won't make the same mistake with you." It wasn't a hug or grand declaration, but it was enough. Father and son stood side by side looking out over the city, 2 generations finally seeing each other clearly. Raymond waited downstairs in the lobby, nervous in his best suit. When Victor stepped off the elevator, he opened his arms and Raymond walked straight into them, right there in front of security cameras and curious staff. Flashbulbs popped from the few remaining paparazzi outside. Victor didn't flinch. For the first time, he kissed the man he loved in public, bright afternoon lights streaming through the glass walls. The video of that kiss went viral within hours, but this time the comments were different. Thousands celebrating courage, sharing their own stories, demanding more representation. The empire didn't collapse. It evolved. Sponsors who had pulled out began calling back. A major magazine wanted Victor on the cover as the face of modern leadership. Yet growth came with new struggles. Raymond's mother was still ill in Chicago, and the medical bills were mounting. Victor offered to help, but Raymond refused at first, proud and independent. "I didn't fall in love with your money," he said one night over dinner. They compromised. Victor flew them both to Chicago for a weekend, meeting Raymond's family properly for the first time. His brother clapped him on the back. His mother hugged him tight, despite her frailty. "You make my son happy," she whispered. "That's all I ever wanted." Back in New York, they began planning the cafe Raymond had always dreamed of. Victor used his connections to secure a perfect location in Williamsburg. Late nights were spent sketching layouts, arguing over paint colors, dreaming out loud. For the first time, Victor felt he was building something that belonged to both of them, not just the Harrington name. But old shadows lingered. One evening, a former board member cornered Victor at a charity gala, voice low and venomous. "You think this fairy tale ends well? The world still runs on tradition." Victor met his gaze steadily. "Then maybe it's time the world changed." He walked away taller, Raymond waiting with 2 glasses of champagne and a proud smile. As autumn painted the city gold, Victor realized the journey wasn't over. Acceptance wasn't a destination, but a daily choice. He still caught himself glancing over his shoulder in certain crowds. Raymond still tensed when Victor's phone rang late at night. Yet each time they chose each other, the fear grew smaller. One crisp Saturday, they drove back to the cottage in Rhinebeck. Uncle James greeted them with open arms. Over lunch on the back porch, the 3 men talked about love and loss and second chances. Victor watched Raymond laugh at one of James's stories and felt a peace he had never known. The boy who had once slapped the man he loved in a crowded restaurant had become the man brave enough to build a new legacy, one where love didn't have to hide. Winter arrived with its usual bite, but inside the Williamsburg Cafe construction moved at full speed. Victor spent weekends swinging hammers alongside Raymond and a small crew of friends, learning for the first time how satisfying it felt to create something with his own hands. Sawdust in his hair, paint on his jeans, he looked nothing like the polished Heir the tabloids still loved to photograph. Marcus showed up every Saturday with coffee and terrible jokes, slowly becoming part of their chosen family. The grand opening was set for Valentine's Day. They decided to make it more than just a cafe, a community space where anyone could feel welcome. Raymond designed the menu with his mother's favorite recipes adapted for modern tastes. Victor handled the business side, securing permits and negotiating with suppliers who suddenly wanted to work with the famous Harrington kid. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. 2 weeks before opening, disaster struck again. A pipe burst in the middle of the night, flooding the entire ground floor. Raymond stood in ankle-deep water at 3 a.m., staring at ruined drywall, fighting back tears. Victor arrived 20 minutes later, still in pajama pants under his coat, and immediately rolled up his sleeves. "We rebuild," he said simply. They worked until dawn, side by side, the way they had learned to face everything now. By sunrise the mess was contained, and they sat on overturned buckets sharing cold pizza, laughing at how far they had come from that restaurant slap. Edward surprised them both by showing up the next day with a team of contractors from Harrington Properties. "No son of mine is doing this alone," he grunted, but the pride in his eyes was unmistakable. He and Raymond shook hands for the first time as equals. Small steps, but each one mattered. Valentine's Day dawned bright and cold. The cafe opened to a line stretching down the block. Local news cameras rolled. Victor stood at the door greeting guests while Raymond worked the espresso machine with effortless grace. When the last customer left that evening, they locked the door and stood in the warm glow of string lights, surveying their dream made real. Raymond pulled Victor close. "We did it," he whispered. The kiss that followed tasted like coffee and hope. Spring brought new challenges and new joys. Raymond's mother's health stabilized after treatment Victor had quietly funded. She flew east for the first time and cried when she saw the cafe named Ray's Bridge in honor of their story. Victor's mother began inviting them both to family brunches, slowly warming to the idea that her son's happiness looked different than she had imagined. Yet societal pressure never fully disappeared. At a high-profile gala in May, an older executive cornered Raymond in the restroom and offered him money to disappear quietly. Raymond told Victor later that night, voice steady, "I told him I'm not for sale." Victor held him tighter, furious and proud. These moments tested them, but each time they emerged stronger. One lazy Sunday morning in June, they lay in bed watching sunlight play across the ceiling. Victor traced the faint scar on Raymond's cheek where the slap had left its mark years ago. "I still hate that I did that," he murmured. Raymond caught his hand and kissed the palm. "It brought us here. I wouldn't change the path, only the pain we caused each other along the way." They decided to take their first real vacation together, 2 weeks in a small beach house on Cape Cod. No phones, no press, just them and the ocean. They walked the shore at sunrise, collected shells, cooked seafood on a grill, and talked about the future without fear. One night under a sky thick with stars, Victor got down on one knee in the sand. "Marry me," he said simply, holding out a simple platinum band engraved with a tiny bridge. Raymond's answer was a kiss that tasted of salt and forever. The proposal made headlines again, but this time the narrative had shifted. Harrington Heir finds love that defies empire. Read one respectful piece. Even Edward sent a congratulatory text, brief but genuine. Back in the city, wedding planning began in earnest. They chose a small ceremony at the cafe itself, surrounded by the people who had stood by them. Marcus would be best man. Uncle James would walk Victor down the aisle. Raymond's brother would fly in from Chicago. The guest list was short but meaningful. No politicians, no board members unless they truly wanted to celebrate. As summer faded into fall, Victor stood on the balcony of their new shared apartment overlooking the East River and realized how much he had grown. The man who once slapped away his greatest love had learned that real strength came from vulnerability. The empire was thriving under his leadership precisely because he led with authenticity. And the family that had once felt like a cage now felt like a foundation. Imperfect, evolving, but his. Raymond stepped out to join him, slipping arms around his waist. "What are you thinking about?" Victor smiled into the night. "How lucky I am that one stupid mistake led me to the best decision of my life." The wedding took place on a crisp October afternoon. String lights twinkled from the cafe rafters, and the scent of fresh coffee mixed with autumn flowers. Victor waited at the makeshift altar wearing a simple navy suit, heart pounding as Raymond walked toward him in a matching one, eyes shining. When their hands met, the room seemed to hold its breath. Vows were spoken simply, no grand declarations, just honest promises to choose each other every day. When they kissed, the small crowd erupted in cheers that echoed off the exposed brick walls they had built together. Edward stood in the back, clapping politely beside Victor's mother. Later he pulled Victor aside near the espresso counter. "I was wrong for so long," he said gruffly. "Seeing you today, I understand what James tried to tell me years ago." Father and son embraced for the first time in decades. Healing wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was real. The honeymoon was quiet. A week in a cabin in Vermont where they hiked, cooked, and talked about expanding the cafe into a small chain of inclusive spaces. Raymond's dream was growing, and Victor was learning that success didn't have to mean empire. It could mean impact. Back home, life settled into a rhythm that felt both ordinary and miraculous. Morning coffee together, evening walks along the river, weekends spent volunteering at LGBTQ youth centers where Victor shared his story without shame. One night a young man approached him after a talk, eyes bright with tears. "You gave me hope," he said. Victor hugged him, remembering how alone he had once felt. Challenges continued, of course. A conservative investor group tried to organize a boycott of Harrington properties, citing family values. The company lost a few contracts, but gained new partnerships with progressive brands that tripled their social media following. Victor learned to navigate the balance between business and belief, always with Raymond's steady presence at his side. Marcus got engaged that winter, and the four of them celebrated with a ridiculous double date at a karaoke bar. Laughing until their sides hurt, Victor realized these were the moments that mattered most. Not boardroom victories, but ordinary joy shared with people who loved him exactly as he was. Spring brought another milestone. Raymond's mother moved to New York permanently, taking a small apartment near the cafe. She worked part-time behind the counter, telling customers stories about her sons and watching with quiet pride as Raymond and Victor built their life. Family, it turned out, could be chosen as well as inherited. One warm evening in May, they hosted the cafe's first anniversary party. The place was packed with regulars, friends, and even a few former Harrington board members who had come around. Victor stood on a chair and raised his glass. "To the man who taught me that love is worth every risk," he said, looking straight at Raymond. The toast was met with thunderous applause. Later, dancing slowly to an old song in the middle of the floor, Raymond whispered, "Remember when you thought this could never happen?" Victor smiled. "I was wrong about a lot of things, but never about you." As the party wound down and guests drifted home, Victor stepped outside for air. The city hummed around him. Cars, sirens, distant laughter. He thought about the boy who had hidden in shadows and the man who now stood in light. The journey had been painful, messy, and beautiful. Every misunderstanding, every sacrifice, every moment of courage had led here. Raymond joined him, slipping an arm around his waist. "Ready to go home?" Victor nodded. Home wasn't the penthouse anymore. It was wherever they were together. Summer heat settled over New York like a blanket. Victor and Raymond spent lazy weekends at the beach house on Long Island, the same place where the proposal had happened. They swam in the ocean, grilled fresh fish, and talked about the future with the easy confidence of two men who had already survived the worst. One afternoon, Raymond found an old photo in a drawer. Victor in his early 20s, stiff in a suit at a family gala, eyes haunted. "You look so lonely here," Raymond said softly. Victor took the photo and tore it in half. "That man doesn't exist anymore." Back in the city, the cafe had expanded into a second location in Harlem. Victor had stepped down from day-to-day operations at Harrington Global to focus on a new foundation supporting LGBTQ youth in hospitality careers. His father, surprisingly, had become one of its biggest donors. Their relationship remained complicated, but weekly lunches had become tradition, awkward at first, then genuine. Uncle James visited often, bringing stories from his quiet life upstate. He and Edward had begun tentative phone calls, healing old wounds in their own time. The family empire was no longer a cage, but a platform, one Victor used carefully to push for change from within. Marcus and his fiancée bought a house in Brooklyn, and the four friends spent weekends renovating, arguing over tile samples, and dreaming aloud. Life felt full in ways Victor had never imagined possible during those dark days after the slap. One crisp fall morning, almost exactly 3 years after that fateful afternoon in the restaurant, Victor stood in front of the original cafe, watching Raymond unlock the door for another busy day. Sunlight caught the wedding band on Raymond's finger, and Victor felt a rush of gratitude so strong it nearly knocked him over. He walked over, pulled his husband into his arms right there on the sidewalk, and kissed him deeply, not caring who saw. A young barista inside snapped a photo and posted it with the caption, "Still in love after all these years." The image went viral again, but this time it symbolized hope rather than scandal. That evening they sat on their balcony with glasses of wine, watching the city lights come alive. Raymond rested his head on Victor's shoulder. "If you could go back and stop yourself from slapping me that day, would you?" Victor thought for a long moment. "No. Because that moment forced me to become the man you deserve." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind built from years of choosing each other through every storm. The empire had survived. Their love had thrived. And somewhere in the vastness of New York, other young men were finding the courage to live their truth because two men had dared to show it was possible. Victor turned to Raymond, smiling. "Ready for whatever comes next?" Raymond's answering grin was bright and sure. "With you? Always." True or false? Once a family secret is exposed, true acceptance is inevitable rather than earned through daily courage.